Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The FDA has approved the Pfizer vaccine, and predictably, the right-wing anti-vax loonies move the goalposts. It's what they do, and look, no surprises, because remember, it's not approved. It's not approved by the FDA. Now, these are people who despise the FDA, but they were using it as their crutch. Now, predictably, now they don't trust the FDA because it's Joe Biden. And this is one of those moments where you were never going to get these people, so we've got to at some point stop appeasing them. Now, some good news. The Kaiser Family Foundation has come out and said that their polling shows that 3 in 10 people were vaccine hesitant because it wasn't FDA approved. And look, I kind of understand that. I get it. I was not thrilled with a rush, but in the middle of a pandemic, nothing is perfect. Now that it has been approved, now that the sufficient studies and people have gone through it, they're saying 3 in 10 people were vaccine hesitant. Now those 3 in 10, good time to go get the vaccine. We'll see what happens. 62% of Americans over 18 are now fully vaccinated, according to the CDC. And now, with another maybe potentially 30%, 3 in 10, we could get to a good place. Now, the American Medical Association, the American Hospital Association, and the American Nurses Association have said that science, data, and thorough research has given us the tools to defeat COVID-19 with the Delta variant surging. There has never been a better time to get vaccinated. Yes. Yes. Pretty simple. New poll out. New USA Today Ipsos poll. Mask mandates. 72% of Americans say it's a matter of health and safety. Not an infringement on your rights. Not an infringement on your personal liberty. Not a constitutional infringement. No, it's a safety issue. And here's the weird thing. Even if it were an infringement on your individual personal religious liberty, it's a damn piece of cloth. I mean, it's crazy. Also in that same poll, 61% of Americans endorse requiring vaccines for people who don't have a medical condition that would preclude them. And they always throw in this religious exemption because there are a bunch of crazy loons out there who do really bizarre stuff in the name of religion. Really? But it is who we are. Now, the South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, not to disappoint, tweeted out that if Joe Biden illegally mandates vaccines, she's going to take every action available under the law to protect South Dakotans from the federal government, not from the virus, which, as we find out now after the Sturgis week, bump it up. More people are getting sick. And with this Delta variant, look, as we move into the fall, when everything starts, and again, we knew the fall was going to be bad, going to get us into a weird spot because those places that can least afford to be hit because they don't have large medical facilities, they don't have the capacity to take care of a large number of people, they're going to really struggle. And, you go, is this one of those things where you go, maybe this is how you thin the herd? I really hate thinking like that. But at some point you got to go, folks, head up. Now, the Pentagon has issued guidance on the vaccine. They are now that the Pfizer is approved by the FDA, they are now mandating it for all military personnel. And as my friend Rich Ojeda said the other day, when he was in the military, there were numerous times when they walked down a line with both sleeves up and a butt cheek hanging out to be jabbed in every place possible. This, not surprising. Now, the weird thing is you now have New York City, who's expecting, I guess it's expected in the coming days, that they're going to mandate their education staff to do it as well. All teachers, all custodians, all principals, all of the central office staff, everyone who comes in contact with kids, they want to have at least one dose by September 27th. And what they're saying is, and this is the weird part, there's no option instead. There's no, hey, we'll get tested, hey, we'll do this. There's, you either get it or find another job, which going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, I struggle with the kind of mandate, but I understand. I do. I understand that, if you're not going to protect yourself, you shouldn't be allowed to make everybody else less safe. Going to be interesting to see how the courts play with this. It's a time that we're in. Now, about 6 in 10 Americans say students and teachers should be required to wear the mask. Makes common sense. Seems reasonable. Seems rational. It is literally just a piece of cloth. And I know, my child has such a beautiful smile. Yeah, I know. Oh, we don't want them covering up their expressions. No, we would rather see them in their caskets, which is weird. But, hey, it is what it is. Now, as I said, we're heading into the fall. The fall was always going to be bad. We've predicted this. This is how the game plays. This is how the models work. Georgia Tech University and North Carolina State University. They did a little mock-up with some researchers there, and it ain't good. They did a study, which basically they're saying in a school of 500, 70% of elementary school students may be infected within 3 months without a mask mandate, and 40% may be infected within 3 months with a mask for the unvaccinated. So if you're unvaccinated, huge chances. And they're basically saying, look, this is what's going to happen in these school settings when this explodes. They said since August 19th, we're talking just a couple of days ago, 160,000 new COVID cases. We're seeing explosions. We're seeing trouble. And what's interesting is, as we said a year plus ago, it's not so much the people who are getting it, because the survival rate is really good, especially if you get sick and you have medical care. Once you overtax the healthcare system, once you get to a point to where doctors are going, I'm flipped to this, and nurses are going, no, and you're setting up, field hospitals and parking garages in Mississippi, you got problems. And I look at someone like Greg Abbott, the governor of Texas. He's been vaccinated. In fact, not only has he been vaccinated, he got his booster, and he got the monoclonal antibody, whatever the fancy drug is to help just in case. But he's still out there going, no, we're not going to do any of that stuff. We're going to make it a personal choice. DeSantis from Florida, vaccinated. Florida's had 3 million people infected since the beginning of this thing. You want to know how bad it is in Florida? This is one of those, I saw this story and I was just like, wow. How bad the surge is in Florida right now? The city of Orlando is asking the people of Orlando, please don't use as much water. Don't use as much, cut your water consumption immediately, so that the liquid oxygen, which is used to treat the municipal water supply, can be diverted to the hospitals and the COVID patients. We're literally taking the oxygen from other places because we don't have enough of it. And yet, you still got DeSantis and the death cult saying, no, we won't wear a mask. We're not doing it ever. No. And not because, of any rational reason. I just don't like it. Or my breath smells bad. I hate wearing those freaking masks. I do. You can ask my wife. Hate it. But do it anyway. because I'm considerate of others. Now, what's interesting to me is we've seen all of these miracle cures. The silver stuff. People were drinking this silver stuff, and you go, huh? The guy with the magic blanket, that was my other favorite one. There's so many miracle cures out there that are being, pushed by hucksters and scam artists and con artists. You gotta wonder, when Trump came out and what was the hydroxychloroquine? First thing you're going, how many people bought that stock just to see it go up so they could cash in? And we knew it didn't work, but you had people out there going, no, it works, Rick. And this latest one, the one they use for to deworm livestock, people are literally taking this stuff, this Ivor something or other, Mectin or something. It's literally used to deworm horses and cattle. And you've got people who are taking this going, no, this is it, because some kook told me, yeah, this is it. You got some wackadoodle going, yeah, here, buy this from us. And then, they get sick and, well, but at least they didn't have worms. I guess that's a positive, right? And the thing that gets me is, I'm struggling with this because, my kids are going back to school. Today was their first day of school. And they went back to a school. And look, I'm grateful to my district who has bucked the Republican leadership in this area. Every single state representative and state senator in the central region of this state of Pennsylvania where I live signed on to a letter saying, no, you don't do those mask mandates. Give families choice. It's a family decision. This is their argument. And this is the thing that gets me. It's a personal choice. No, it's not a personal choice. You don't have a choice to make me sick. You don't have a choice to make my children ill. You don't get that choice. You don't get to decide that. Your choice is follow the rules or don't. Don't go. Those are your choices at this point. And we've been pushing this idea of hyper individualism for way too long. And it's gotten to the point where we're selfish and self-centered, and we don't think about anyone else, could care less about anyone else. That's how we've been trained. We're Americans, damn it. We don't care about anyone. And, I say this all the time, Justice Hugo Black was right. You have the right to flail your fists around until it touches the tip of my nose. We've gone to a couple concerts here lately with the kids because, we're vaccinated. We take the proper precautions. You got to go out and you got to live your life, but we're still safe and cautious. And you look around at the people who, well, only 62% of the country's vaccinated. Pennsylvania is not much better than that. And you know that almost half of them aren't. And you know that in a crowd of, 10,000 people, there are going to be people there who have it. And it's kind of like a game of, especially if you're unvaccinated, a kind of a game of Russian roulette. And I look at this story from Georgia Tech and North Carolina State where they're saying, look, within 3 months, without a mask, you're looking at 70% of the people infected. 40% of elementary kids with masks. So you're still going to have a bump. Especially among those kids who are unvaccinated and unmasked. And we haven't gotten down to the elementary school kids yet. We haven't gotten all the way down. We're still trying to get Granny all vaccinated. And the thing that's frustrating is we're in this, as I said, in this moment where, it's my choice. Well, it's your choice to do what you want, and there are consequences. It's kind of like I try and teach my children. You can do things, you can do what you want, but there are consequences. Right now there are a lot of people going, well, employers shouldn't be allowed to mandate that their workplaces have people who are vaccinated. And you go, really? They should allow you, one person, to come in and make everybody else sick, and not just your employee, your coworkers and fellow employees, but also the customers? You think you have that right? And this is the weird thing about us. Had we, again, done the right thing at the right time, right from the beginning, we wouldn't be in this. We would not be in this mess. But like children, throwing a temper tantrum in the cereal aisle, here we are. Negative consequences. And I don't know the way forward in this. I don't know what you do if you're Joe Biden. I don't know what you do if you're a governor of a state of recalcitrant children who refuse to protect themselves, let alone everyone else in the community. I don't know what you do if you're the mayor. I don't know what you're doing if you're sitting on the school board listening to these people throwing temper tantrums who 6 months ago couldn't do fifth grade math, who are now virologists and epidemiologists and experts on breakthrough and mask. And I mean, it's, if you watch some of these videos, it's rather, one, comical, because I do get a little entertainment from it. I do find it, pretty funny that, these people did not pass high school biology. The D- they got was a gift to move them along and out of the school. But somehow now, because, again, they did their research, they were reading Facebook on the can, and now they're the expert. They read a meme. It said, it's right here. And now somehow they're the expert in all this? And we're going to listen to the whiners and the complainers, the ones who evidently cloaked in the blood of Jesus? Help us. This is why, I keep coming back to, I hope there are smart people out there talking to these folks. And look, I'm not someone who believes that government is always right or honest or any of that. But in this moment, and I go back to where I started, a year and a half ago when all this was going on, I went to my doctor and I spoke with him. And this is where the medical profession, this is where, most of the people that I talk to are on the same page. There are a handful of kooks. And most of them, sadly, they're in it for some kind of game. So going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I'm glad that like I said, I'm glad my school district has mandated the masks. You got the choice. Don't send your kids. Keep them home. You can, if you're so smart, you're the virologist, you can teach them math too. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show.
More American than workers standing up, and the union gives a voice to win. On the Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day IWW leader Frank Little was buried in Butte, Montana. Little had been lynched on August 1st by police agents thought to be working for the despised Anaconda Copper Company. He had arrived in town to help organize 14,000 striking copper miners. Devastated by the deaths of 168 miners in the June fire at Granite Mountain and Spectacular Mines, mine workers formed the Metal Mine Workers Union and walked off the job. Frank Little had previously worked as a hard rock miner and organizer for the Western Federation of Miners. He also took part in the free speech campaigns on the West Coast. Little was involved in early drives to industrially organize oil workers and lumberjacks. He voiced his opposition to the First World War and sought to stop workers from enlisting. When Little arrived in Butte in July, he worked to build strike support, picket lines, and spread the strike to other trades across the city. Early on August 1st, 6 masked men broke into the boarding house where he was staying. He was beaten and taken from his room. His assailants tied him to the bumper of their car and dragged him through the granite streets of Butte to the Milwaukee Bridge, where he was hanged. An ominous note was pinned to his bullet-ridden body with the words that read, "Others take notice, first and last warning." It included the numbers 3, 7, and 77, as well as the initials of other union organizers in the area. As many as 10,000 marched in his funeral procession. Days after his lynching, martial law was declared. Labor radicals were rounded up and charged with espionage. The miners' strike and union were crushed. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, members of the BCTGM Local 42 out on strike today in Atlanta. That means now the Nabisco workers in Atlanta who went out today will join those who went out in Portland, those who went out in Aurora, Colorado, those who went out in Richmond, Virginia, and Chicago. All tonight are on strike against Nabisco. And look, this is something I've been saying should have happened 20 years ago. Workers should have taken a stand as companies were shipping jobs overseas and down to Mexico and destroying working conditions. This is something that should have happened decades ago. And fortunately right now, there's an opportunity, and the workers are saying, we've had enough of it. And here to share some thoughts on just how bad it is and well, what's going on. I've asked Alex Press to come talk with us. Alex is a staff writer over at Jacobin magazine. Alex, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me on.
So tonight we got 5 facilities for Nabisco out on strike. The most recent, Atlanta. Why?
Yeah, so that's a distribution center for Nabisco just outside of Atlanta. They walked off the job too. And this is because contract negotiations are ongoing and sort of dragging on. These are pattern agreements. So they're identical contracts for each of these different locations across the country. And the company is actually Mondelez International. That's what produces the Nabisco snacks that everyone's familiar with, Oreos, Chips Ahoy, Nutter Butter. And so they are sort of sick of the concessions that the company is proposing. And so, as you mentioned, started in Portland on August 10th. Workers walked off the job, and it's quickly spread across the country.
Now, this isn't just, Nabisco now. I mean, I go back, the Oreo for, several years ago. I haven't bought a bag of Oreos, I can't tell you how long, simply because of how bad the workers have been treated in Chicago and Philadelphia and other places as they close down plants. Now they close down plants in New Jersey. And I think also in Atlanta as well, if I'm not mistaken. This is finally, I think, people going, enough of the poor working conditions, enough of the poverty wages, but also enough of the job loss.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is, though, I think the similarity these workers share across these locations is that they're coming out of the pandemic, right? Which is a really important context for all the stuff that you're seeing and will see going forward in the next year or so, is that people have been pushed to the brink. So in food production industry, at the manufacturing level, workers have been working so hard through the pandemic. You didn't often see anything about it because these weren't the sort of like what was considered the essential workers, right? These weren't necessarily healthcare workers, but snacking is up in the United States. We're all stuck inside, right, during the pandemic. And so these companies have been pushing their workers and they haven't been hiring new people. So workers at Nabisco, just like people at Frito-Lay, for example, at the recent strike, and all sorts of places that don't even have unions, are being forced into overtime. So they're working 80-hour weeks. That's what people in Chicago, for example, were saying, is that they're working 80-hour weeks and they won't put up with it. As you mentioned, in Chicago, they also have this history that the Nabisco plant there on the south side of Chicago, is this institution in the community. It pays almost $30 an hour. It's one of the few places to make a living wage on the south side of Chicago. A ton of Black workers, right? This is a really important institution in the community. And in 2016, Nabisco offered them a really horrible ultimatum, which was accept what was basically a 60% cut in pay and benefits or accept mass layoffs. And of course, the workers refused. That's a ridiculous question. 60% cut in your pay is just impossible. And so Nabisco laid off some 500 workers and did build up its production facilities in Mexico. Now, I think it's important to note because it's not a question necessarily of like nationalism here. Mexican workers get paid so little because they're subject to, pretty much faux unions, right? The company chooses what union to enforce a contract with, and the workers have a lot of trouble organizing there. And that's how they end up getting paid so little. So, the union BCTGM that represents Nabisco workers has been in touch to some extent with those workers in Mexico. But again, like this, the amount of strength that's needed to combat this sort of offshoring of jobs is just, very far from where these workers are at right now.
Especially when you're talking about I would argue that the Mexican government isn't free of corruption and grift and all of the things that go along. So there's no enforcement, even if you could. And look, right now our trade agreement has a little language to force independent unions, but you got to go through, fight that, and then have a dog with some teeth that are actually going to enforce it.
Right. And again, this company, Nabisco, and its ownership, Mondelez International, have no interest in that, right? They just want to enforce, cut the labor costs, have skyrocketing profits. That's what they've seen. They've seen huge profits over the past year with the pandemic, and the workers haven't gotten a dime of that. And instead, they've risked their health. There have been outbreaks in these facilities of COVID. And again, they're working against 16-hour shifts. So you come in for an 8, and when you finish your 8, your boss tells you you're working another 8 right now. Just imagine dealing with that. You have kids, you call your husband, you say, hey, actually, I can't take care of the kids. Suddenly your husband can't work because he has to take care of the kids. It's a disaster, and it's completely impossible to live under those conditions if you're doing that every single day.
Yeah, now I had someone go, well, you're getting paid overtime for it. What's the big deal? The big deal is you're working 80 hours a week every week. Eventually it gets to be not just taxing on your family, as you pointed out, but also on your health.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we saw this with the Frito-Lay strike in Topeka, Kansas, that the workers openly talked about how there were suicides, there were divorces, there were fights on the shop floor, because imagine the amount of stress and strain you're under at hour 15. All of a sudden your coworker isn't working as fast as you want them to, or he says something to you, you're very quick to just lose it, right? People are losing their minds working these shifts. It's a huge problem.
Yeah, especially, as you pointed out, the pandemic hasn't made these things easier. And yet these workers, they weren't necessarily, the ones that we applauded as the frontline heroes and essential, but they were, for, like it or not, the snacks and the things, the prepared foods that came out helped people get through the last year and a half, whether we want to admit it or not.
Right. And part of the tension here is that, and this was true when I talked to people at Frito-Lay, the workers there who went on strike last month, was they see that their management gets to go home to their families, or their management has air conditioning, whereas the factory shop floor is hot. And they feel this sense of tension of like, our bosses are safe. Our bosses are not worried. Our bosses are not stressing to the point of destroying their lives. And here we are just doing this for the sake of producing snacks. So it gets to you. It's not surprising that we're seeing these strikes happen now.
It's the ultimate, which side are you on? I mean,
Exactly.
in any one of these moments, you have to look at, who's on which side. It's the ultimate. You see the boss with his feet up on the desk in the air conditioner, or worse yet, at home, via Zoom, barking out orders. It's not hard to see who's on which side.
Right. I mean, so I spoke to one of the workers in Chicago who's on strike, and those workers in Chicago joined the strike late Thursday last week, so August 19th. So they were the sort of biggest shop recently to join the strike. And one of the workers said to me, we don't have a problem with working. The problem is that we don't get to go home. How do you call your husband and say, I'm not coming home? That's what our lives are like right now. They treat us like animals, treat us like humans, treat us the way you want to be treated. And she said, we see that management is home with their families when we're working overtime. It's impossible not to see that we're being treated differently, even as companies like Nabisco say we're all one big family. That's not how family treats each other, right? And so people have been pushed to the brink.
Right.
And fortunately, they're on strike, and it's 24/7. The picket line is set up.
No, but here's the thing, and this is where I've had people go, well, why would this company want to spend so much on overtime? You're working 80 hours a week. After 40, no matter where you're at in this country, you still have to pay that premium. Now, I believe their contract has overtime after 8. Double time on their or time and a half on their 6 punch, double time on their 7 punch, which is a massive premium, which I understand they're trying to claw back. But when you start looking at those numbers, I've had people go, why don't they just hire more people? Why don't they hire more staff?
Right. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people ask that. And to be clear, the contract right now is good on premium pay. They get 1.5 the standard rate for when they work beyond an 8-hour shift. They get 1.5 on Saturdays, and they get double pay on Sundays. And that's exactly what Mondelez is trying to get rid of in this new contract. They want what they're calling an alternative work week, where, you're just paid, even if you work a 16, if it's within that first 40 hours, it's not overtime. And they want to get rid of that premium pay on the weekends completely, right? So workers are saying this could cost them $10,000 a year for some of them. I've actually seen numbers even higher than that from other workers. And people ask, that's a ton of money the company is spending on overtime, at least for now. But the thing is, when a company in a tight labor market like this is looking around and thinking about hiring new workers, they're going to have to attract those workers and pay them benefits. This is a union shop, even as many problems as exist, despite it being a union shop. These workers still get benefits. Those are costs beyond wages. And they also have the costs of hiring and finding people in the first place and then training them, right? These jobs do take training. They do take a hiring process, and companies don't want to spend that money. So it's not a straight calculation of, am I spending more on wages than I would if I just hired new workers? It's actually all the other things that come with hiring new workers. And employers, not just at Nabisco, but across a variety of industries right now, are instead preferring to go with mandatory overtime. And that's what's leading to all these complaints about 14 and 16-hour days at all sorts of places.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and look, I've been in those situations where I've worked 12, 14. At one time I worked 36 straight hours. I know after the first 8, 10, productivity starts to decline. By the 12th hour, it's taken a dive. By 16, it's in the tank. By 24, you're getting nothing out of me. What incentive is for the company to keep you there as productivity and safety and all of the things go down and all the negatives come up? Quality control has to go down. So as a consumer, I got to tell you, I'm a little concerned of the products that are coming out now that I know that half of the products are probably produced by people who are in their 12th, 14th, 16th hour. I got to wonder about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's true, especially at not just Nabisco, but all sorts of sort of industrial level food processing. I mean, slaughterhouses, famously, in this way, people are overworked and all of a sudden they're not being careful with food. And that's how you get outbreaks. I've reported even on the sort of end of the supply chain, say Chipotle, for example, workers all the time there tell me that there's a reason that Chipotle has all these food outbreaks. They have all these illnesses. It's because workers are overworked and they don't have time to wash their hands. They know that they don't have time to take the safety measures. And everyone's falsifying the records here about staffing and employment even at Chipotle shops. And so, yeah, it's totally a consumer problem, too. You don't want people making your food who haven't slept in days. I mean, that just seems very clear. But these companies are also pretty clear about denying that that's a problem, right? And so, you have workers telling you that they're afraid they're going to fall asleep on the assembly line, and they're telling you the truth, but companies will deny that that's a problem.
Now, is there anything that the Department of Labor could do? I mean, we're right now, and I've said this before, I think Joe Biden is the most pro-union president in my lifetime. And that's not saying an awful lot, for the past presidents we've had. But he is the most pro-union president, the most pro-worker president in my lifetime. Is there anything this administration is doing, can do, anything the BCTM GM wants them to do? Thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm not sure that there's a straight answer, right? I mean, the variety of sort of things on display here with both the Department of Labor and also, say, the PRO Act at the legislative level, things that would strengthen unions and workers' rights would inevitably help these issues. But it is entirely within a company's legal rights to force overtime. There have been attempts, and actually, I think there's been one successful pass at a local level to ban the practice of mandatory overtime. And that would be another approach that would stop this sort of thing. Workers, some of them want overtime, but to be forced into another 8 after your first 8, I think most people would agree that that's unjust and shouldn't be allowed, right? Especially as just a cost-saving measure by a company that doesn't want to hire a new worker. So there are things that can be done, but again, I mean, the important thing for people to realize is that it's legal to make someone work 80 hours, and that's a big problem, right? I mean, and the FLSA, like a big legislative effort long ago, in part was about trying to, sort of create labor standards here that would make it profitable for a company to hire a new person instead of working someone overtime. But that didn't really factor in benefits and all the other costs of hiring and training. And so companies now end up doing this cost calculation, and it costs human lives in the process. I mean, that's what these people are dealing with. You can't work 80 hours, especially if you're on the older side of things, without it really doing damage to your health.
Yeah, and this is one of those that goes back to a question an old Romanian guy asked me. Do you work to live or live to work? And it's a simple question. These poor folks seem like they're living just to work.
Right. I mean, this is a horrible thing. I think it's beyond just Nabisco. This question that I think a lot of people are increasingly asking themselves after the pandemic, which is, why is my entire life work? I think a lot of people did get to experience what having free time was like, whether they were forced off into unemployment or otherwise had additional benefits from the state that gave them the opportunity to pursue other things. And they realize that they don't want to work until they die. And so there's a reason that hours and control over scheduling is becoming such a point of contention at so many places. I mean, Nabisco especially, but all sorts of industries. I mean, I recently wrote about the film industry and workers there too, many of whom do manual labor on film sets, are working 14-hour shifts, 16-hour shifts, and then getting in car crashes on the way home because they're so tired.
Yeah, no,
and at the end, and they're saying, you know, this is my entire life and it's not worth it. To make a movie, it might be fun, it might be glamorous, I might love it, but at the end of the day, what if I want to have a family? What if I want to fall in love? What if I want to raise kids? Can't do it with a 16-hour day.
No, you're right on. And this is where we do need policy, but we also need unions strong enough to make sure that that doesn't happen. And you know, we're in this position where unions have been so weakened that they really haven't had the strength to stop. I mean, we fought for the 8-hour day, 140 years ago, and you know, not much has improved, you know, on that front since. In fact, you know, obviously, as we've found out, things are rolling backwards. So where do you see this going? You know, with the last question I've got for you. This is the 5th facility. Are there more going to come online? Do you see in the coming days? How big can this get? And are they talking? And is there a way to solve this?
Yeah, I mean, the way it can be solved, at least at Nabisco, is of course if Nabisco can accept that the workers don't want any more concessions. You know, they're currently in contract negotiations. I haven't gotten confirmation. You know, I'd heard that they were meeting today, that Nabisco had called up the BCTGM and said, we want to talk. I don't know exactly what the schedule of those talks are, but, you know, the workers are very clear. They do not want their overtime taken away. They do not want, another issue here is that newer workers, Mondelez International wants to slot them into a worse healthcare plan, create 2 tiers of healthcare for workers, right? That's another thing they do not want. There's a question about pensions being taken away or reinstated. So, you know, Mondelez can recognize that this is not the time for workers to accept concessions, that workers have been through a lot and have made the company a ton of money, and the company can afford to cover them, as one worker told me. You know, they have the money to cover healthcare. There's no reason that they should be pushing to take that away. And so I think it's a very easy solution. You know, it's not like this company is unprofitable in any sense. And fortunately, I think it's important to underline that the workers are doing exactly what it takes to win that, which is saying, you know, we're done and walking off the job and doing it together in a way that's spread so that they're not geographically isolated. You know, the stewards at these shops are in communication all the time. They're supporting each other. And, you know, I think it helps that the public has, you know, they're having a lot of support. People recognize that this is unjust. Public sentiment, I think, is on the side of workers right now. I mean, mostly because the public itself, all of us are being overworked too. So we recognize ourselves, even if we're not working 80-hour weeks in an assembly line. You know, the workers are on the right side of this. And so I think it's very clear that the answer in this problem, in this dispute, is for Mondelez to accept the workers' demands and, you know, bargain a fair contract.
No, and you're absolutely right. I hope folks will check out your work. You do fabulous stuff over at Jacobin magazine. We'll get stuff out. Alex Press, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Have a good night.
You know, again, I come back to this. You know, I've been calling for more strikes for quite some time. This seems to be moving us in the right direction. And we'll see how this plays out. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1900. That was the day that folk singer Malvina Reynolds was born to a Jewish family in San Francisco. Her parents were socialists and operated a tailor shop. Malvina learned the price of speaking out for what you believe in at a young age. Her parents opposed U.S. entry into World War I. Because of this, Malvina's high school would not issue her a diploma. She was able to still go to college at Berkeley, where she eventually earned her Ph.D. She married carpenter and labor organizer William Bud Reynolds. She became a prolific folk singer, playing around the Los Angeles area. During the 1960s, she wrote about songs supporting civil rights and labor labor rights. Her song, Free Enterprise, offers the lyrics, "The air you breathe is poison. The food you eat is worse. The dollars in your paycheck are pennies in your purse. There's nothing free about it. You pay at every turn, except the guys in Wall Street who have the stuff to burn. They had to make new brain machines to count their profits rise, but since there's always room for more, they can still make their profits soar. A little war does wonders for free enterprise." Perhaps her most well-known song is Little Boxes. The song was inspired by driving by hillside houses in Daly City, California. It talks about the conformity of middle-class suburbia.
Where they are put in boxes and they come out all the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family in boxes made of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
And a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky, and they all look just the same.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said, the reality is it's about time. It's about time we see more of these strikes happening. Remember, you go back to the passage of the National Labor Relations Act. This wasn't passed because a bunch of hippie liberals or as the right loves it, a bunch of communists, a bunch of socialists. It wasn't passed because they had the power to get things passed. It was passed because average everyday workers, by the thousands, by the tens of thousands, went on strike often. And they were ugly, bloody strikes. American labor history is one of really wars. You think about the coal field wars that happened, all across the coal fields of this country, where the bosses paid thugs to come and literally shoot people in their tents, hang labor leaders from railroad bridges. Our history is an ugly, dirty, bloody, violent history. What we take for granted today, the civility that we take for granted today, was created out of the blood and the lives of thousands before us. And I've said for years, we easily give back what we didn't fight for. We easily hand over what we didn't bleed for. The 8-hour day being one of them. And I've said before, when I started working, more than 30 some years ago, 8-hour day was sacrosanct. You got overtime after 8 hours. If you had to work on your Saturday, it was time and a half. You had to work on your Sunday, it was double time. That was even the retail stores, because they were unionized, because they had all internalized this, because they understood 8 hours for work, 8 hours for rest, 8 hours for what you will. The idea that you didn't live solely to work. The idea that work was to make your life better, not more miserable. It was to help you support your family, not break it up. And here we are back in this moment where inequality is just, out of control. The difference between the bosses and the CEO class and the person on the shop floor has never been greater. And our ability to fight back has almost never been weaker. So when I see these workers finally saying enough, and it's been years this stuff has been going on. It's only been massively magnified during the pandemic. It's only been really highlighted because we lived through this event. And while we were heaping praise on people who were going to work during the shutdowns, and we were saying how heroic they were and how much we needed them and how essential they were, we still treated them like garbage. And it's what we do. It's what we do to workers in this country. This is not new. We've always treated workers as just a negative on a balance sheet, as another tool to be used and discarded. And finally, and I'm hoping the message is getting out beyond, these are people who just want to protect a little bit of what they have and make lives better. I'm hoping the message gets out that you can change things, that we don't have to put up with the kind of insanity that sadly, I hear too many people having to deal with. Long hours, desperate wages, insufferable conditions. We're supposed to be making lives better. Progress makes lives better. We're supposed to be doing better. Remember when they told us that, technology was going to benefit us all? Remember when they told us that, as we automate and we make things easier, it's going to be better? We no longer have to do those dirty factory jobs. We never like to work those long hours. We're all going to do better. And yet everybody I talk to, doesn't matter what kind of job they do. Doesn't matter if it's white collar, blue collar, red collar, ring around the collar, doesn't matter. They're all everyone's being pushed to the maximum. Everyone's being pushed for that last bit of humanity. And it's infuriating. So the only choice that workers have, you only got two choices. There's, you take it, take all the guff that the boss is going to give you, the horrible working conditions, all of that, or you do what these folks have done. Fold your arms and march your feet right out the door. Because the only power that working people have is the power to withhold their labor. That's it. There's nothing more. There is nothing more. And sadly, we really haven't, as a country, thought this way in a long time. I look at these conditions, and I'll be honest, I'll be the first one to tell you, these jobs have been BCT GM jobs. These have been union jobs for years. I can't imagine how bad things would be. I can't imagine how bad things would be if there weren't a union there, because we would never know what's going on, because these workers would just be, well, you don't like it, you're fired. They would be at will. They have no rights. I can't imagine what happens in these warehouses. I can't imagine what happens in these distribution centers, that they don't have the voice. I mean, we got a peek of what was going on at Amazon. We get a peek of that. The organizing campaign in Bessemer, Alabama, kind of exposed a little bit of what goes on. But you look at the fact that they put those distribution centers a lot in rural communities. And this is one of these things where my rural friends, you got to wake up. This is one of those moments where you go, they strategically place those distribution centers and those warehouses and those facilities in rural areas because they know the hyper individualism, hooray for me and the heck with everyone else, is really rampant. They know that individual mentality is really high. So you standing together with your brothers and sisters there in the workforce, they know that's probably not going to happen, and they can easily divide you. This way they can exploit you, and they can work you, 80 hours a week. Or, oh boy, they can work you 16 hours a day and not pay you overtime. Alternative scheduling. I remember the first time I had to work. I was a casual. I was working for this company in Cleveland. And this is years ago, because the casuals used to get beat up because you really didn't have union rights, because you weren't technically covered under the contract. So to be a casual, you had to go through a bunch of garbage to be able to get on the list. And once you were on the seniority list, the whole world changed. But as a casual, if you were dumb enough to come in on Saturday morning at 7 a.m., you could be there till Sunday afternoon. And a couple of times I was, because you had to clean up. Everything had to get done. So if they were behind, you stayed until it was done. And you had the choice. You had the choice to leave. You had the choice to go home. They just never call you again. But that never happened to the full-time guys. And it was always one of those things that was angering to me. And one of those things that over the years I fought to get our union to make stop. Again, this is one of those things, the power of workers having the ability to join and form unions, to have a voice and a say in their working conditions. And here we go, to make things better. So these workers at these 5 facilities throughout the country that work for Nabisco, they're trying to make their lives better. And I love the fact, as Alex Press pointed out, that the company wants to, again, divide them by offering new people less health care, by offering them something that is going to make their lives worse and divide the workplace. You know, unions fell into this nonsense to help their members because their members wanted more because they were greedy. And the companies wanted to slash future wages and hold future wages down. So they agreed to these idiotic 2-tier wage systems, which I was against from the beginning because it was stupid. And then really quickly, you found out that there was a division in your ranks. And a lot of unions have tried to close those. But the damage was done. For me, there's a moment, and I think we're here. I think we're in an interesting moment. Because most people that I talk to, and I, doing what I do, I have the privilege of talking to a lot of people who work for a living. They're tired. They're fed up. They're frustrated. The benevolent employer that they thought they worked for has just abused them. And they're looking. And for me, there's an opportunity here to say, look, we know how to fix these things. We know how to deal with these things. It's called organizing. It's called looking at the person to your right and looking at the person to your left and going, we're in the same boat. We need to do something. Not I, not you, not they, not them. We. We is a word I think we need to learn again. For too long, it's been I and me. At some point, we has to come back. And I look at these workers at Nabisco. They've figured this out. As I understand, and I've talked to a couple people, they haven't had anyone cross their picket lines. No one. Think about that in this day and age. That many people and not one person. Because they all understand what they're fighting for. But here's the other side of this. Look how badly broken our labor laws are. You know, when I tell people there are folks that work 80 hours a week, they don't believe it. How could you possibly work 80 hours a week? Exactly. 16 hours a day, 12 hours a day, every day, like we saw at Frito-Lay. We need major comprehensive labor law reform. We need an update to the Fair Labor Standards Act. We need to include other occupations. And here's the worst part. For all of my friends who love the fact that they can be independent contractors. They're their own boss. I know freelance journalists. I know freelance workers who work 80 hours a week and they don't get overtime. In fact, as the one person told me, he barely makes minimum wage. Which is the reason that all these companies keep pushing for these law changes to benefit them. Look, they don't lobby and spend money unless it's going to benefit them. You know, as the old man always told me, if a rich guy takes a buck out of his pocket to tell you you don't need something, you better spend $2 to get it. And we better start spending a lot of $2 to get major labor law reform, something like the PRO Act, or I would argue something even better. But sadly, we've got too many corporate Democrats and a Republican Party who dead set against our ability to fight for better wages, hours, conditions. Dead set against our improving workers' lots in life. And I point to this story, this Kristen Sinema, who, please, Arizona, can you give us someone better? She says no matter what, she's not signing on to the $3.5 trillion spending bill. They have tried everything that they can figure out how to do to bring her around. Not going to happen. She has said not going to vote for the $3.5 trillion budget reconciliation bill. And you got to go, okay, well, if not 3.5, what? Or is it none? Now, it looks like she's taking a position that the $1.2 trillion bipartisan agreement is what she's agreeing to. And that's it, which this is a weird moment because I think you have some Dems in the House who are going, well, if we can't get something on the other side to deal with the human infrastructure to make people's lives better overall, well, we're not doing this either. And as I feared from the beginning, there might be a possibility we get nothing, which is wholly unacceptable. But possible. Now, if I'm rating this, if I'm an odds person, if I'm putting money down, I'm going to say we're going to get something, and eventually they bring cinema around. But why? How is it that this one woman seems to be hell bent on stopping what would help her state enormously, a state that is going to be wildly affected by climate change, is being affected at this very moment by the effects of climate change. California burning, Lake Mead at its lowest level, the water supply in that whole region basically evaporating. What are you going to do? Phoenix is like the fastest growing city in the country, and yet they're not going to have enough water. What are you going to do? What are you going to do when those folks start moving, when our American refugees start moving around because they don't have any water? And you look back and you go, we could have done something. We could have invested in technologies that would alleviate some of our climate problems. Am I saying we're going to fix it? No, I think we're too far gone. And look, I have conservative friends who go, yeah, we're too far gone. Heck with it. So doubling down on, yeah, we're going to do nothing because, well, it's too late now. We're going to just continue to do the wrong, dumb stuff. And it's interesting how the same party, the same political operatives, the same voices, the same people are the ones telling you don't wear a mask, don't get vaccinated, don't do that because it's all a hoax. The same ones who are continuing this virus are the same ones who will do nothing on the climate change issue. And then the first ones to go, well, there are all these bad things happening. How come Joe Biden isn't dealing with that? I mean, isn't it remarkable that there are people who are going to look at Joe Biden and go, how come Biden isn't doing anything about the virus? When there are a large number of people in this country going, I'm not doing it. I'm struggling, people. Help me here. Help me figure this out. Because it's insane. And this thing with cinema, I just don't get it. Look, I understand $3.5 trillion might be a little bit too chunky, a little bit too big. I personally think it's too small. I think we need larger investment. And as I've said before, the American Society for Civil Engineers said we need about $4.6 trillion just to get to even. Just to get to even. Nobody's talking about state of the art. We don't want to be China. Just even. Just productive. Create the jobs we need to get our products to market and be able to get me across town without a front end alignment. Seemed like common sense. It just did. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1912. That was the day the U.S. Congress approved the formation of the Commission on Industrial Relations. In the early 1900s, the terrible work conditions and entrenched resistance to union organizing had led to increased labor unrest. In 1910, 2 union members in San Francisco bombed the Los Angeles Times building, killing 20 people. The public outcry led officials in Washington to decide they needed to get serious about investigating the reasons behind the mounting anger of of working people. The commission included 9 members, 3 workers, 3 employers, and 3 community members. The leader was Frank P. Walsh, a labor lawyer from Missouri. Led by Walsh from 1913 to 1915, the commission embarked on a sweeping investigation of the conditions of work in the United States. They conducted 740 interviews that took them 154 days to complete. Interviewees included IWW leader Big Bill Haywood, labor hellraiser Mother Jones, and champion of working people lawyer Clarence Darrow. The commission investigated the Paterson, New Jersey silk mill strike and multiple other work actions. For 3 days, the commission grilled John D. Rockefeller on the Ludlow Massacre. The result was an 11-volume compilation of testimony. 100,000 copies of a shorter final report were published. The final report described the poor working conditions at many job sites and the brutal repression of the labor movement. It critiqued the treatment of agricultural workers. Predictably, many found fault with the commission's findings. The New York Herald called the commission's chairman Walsh a Mother Jones in trousers. Despite these critics, the comprehensive report stood as a powerful, detailed review of the conditions faced by thousands of working people every day. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
America's economic and political inequality has led workaday Americans to exclaim, "The system is broken. Let's fix it." But there's another version of this protest that I'm hearing more frequently these days. "The system is fixed. Let's break it." That certainly applies to such rigged systems as money in politics and voter suppression, but it's also relevant to seemingly mundane matters that restrain our personal freedoms. One of the insidious fixes we need to break is the claim by brand-name corporations that we consumers must be banned by law from repairing the products they sell to us. The weak battery in your cell phone, the fuel sensor in a farmer's tractor, some gizmo in the toaster you bought, a fuse in your business's truck. You could fix all of these yourself or, with a little hassle, take the problem to a local repair shop. But no, such manufacturing powerhouses as Apple, John Deere, and Panasonic assert that only their corporate technicians are authorized to open the product, which you own, to make it work again. So you are expected to deliver it to their distant facility, wait however many days or weeks they tell you, and pay an inflated price. They've literally fixed the fix for consumer products. They impose their control by making the products as needlessly complicated as possible, then claiming that the complexity is their patented proprietary product. Thus, they say they don't have to provide repair manuals or sell repair tools to consumers or independent shops. Gotcha. To give their closed profiteering system the force of law, the giants have deployed armies of lobbyists and lawyers to legislatures and courts, arguing that self-repair people really are scoundrels trying to circumvent safety and environmental rules. This is Jim Hightower saying, for action, go to U.S. Public Interest Research Group, uspurg.org. The Hightower Radio Lowdown is brought to you by the Lowdown Happy Hour, live streamed from the Chat and Chew Cafe. Details at hightowerlowdown.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the real entertainment, as I said, the real entertainment has been watching some of these school board meetings. The folks who, just 6 months ago couldn't figure out how to help their kids with fifth grade math are now PhDs in virology and epidemiology. These are the biologists who now they understand, they know it all, and they'll be the first to tell you they know it all now because they saw it on Facebook, did the research they did, and while it's interesting to watch and it's fun to watch the spectacle, sadly it's dangerous, and we've seen brawls, we've seen all kinds of threats. And it's not just, in crazy places, right here in the state of Pennsylvania, we see the same kind of thing going on. And it's one of those crazy things, which is why I've asked Cyril Mychalejko to come talk with us. Cyril is a freelance columnist for the Bucks County Courier Times and the Intelligencer. Cyril, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Rick.
So, like I said, I've been watching some of these school board meetings with great interest. as people throw their temper tantrums and come up with some very quotable things like, my daughter has such a beautiful smile, I don't want her to cover it up. And I'm covered in the blood of Jesus and I can't possibly get sick. A lot of good quotable stuff, but a lot of insanity and a lot of threats and a lot of stuff going on. It's something you've been working on.
Yeah, it's been something I've been tracking for a while. I mean, the problem is like Bucks County is like fertile ground for right-wing extremism. We're one of the counties with the most people arrested at the insurrection. We have QAnon folks running for school board. The Andy Meehan, who ran against Fitzpatrick in the primary, was a QAnon follower who also actually runs the voter education and outreach organization in Bucks County. So, across the board, we're seeing that extremism, but it's escalated now because of the work of the progressive community. So on the one hand, you have this like right-wing radicalism that's just kind of growing in Bucks County, but you also have a vibrant, flourishing, and growing progressive movement. And a lot of people have kind of been doing the work to kind of like expose this extremism so that we can kind of like confront it and deal with it. And one of the things we found out is that there is a local militia that wanted to interject itself into the Central Bucks school district meeting on Wednesday. And the group, the Proud American Patriots Network, they identify themselves as 3%ers, right? So, just to give you a rundown of who the 3%ers are, the Southern Poverty Law Center says they're one of three core components within the anti-government militia movement. And the reference to 3% stems from the dubious historical claim that only 3% of American colonists fought against the British during the War of Independence. There's been 6 people arrested from the insurrection that were 3%ers, and so this is very dangerous, right? I mean, they are armed. They're preparing for battle. I was able to get my hands on screenshots of their training manual. And in the manual, this is what they're telling people, right? This PAPN militia or paramilitary group.
Right.
They want to produce a combat-ready unit that responds rapidly to known suspected enemy activity and defeats that enemy. There's information about sniper operations, headshots, reconnaissance, surveillance, intelligence gathering, enemy harassment, etc.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Cyril. None of this stuff's new. I mean, this went on for all the last 4 years under the former guy, and was percolating during the 8 before that when Obama was in the White House. I mean, you go back and you look at that march in Virginia that they had, what they called a lobby day, where you had all the people dressed up in their military costumes with their guns, claiming that they were lobbying. That wasn't a lobbying day. That was a show of force. That was a military exercise to go, hey, look what we can do. That was kind of their coming out, in my view.
No, absolutely, and you're right. Like even like the radicalization of the right here in Bucks County. I mean, I haven't been tracing it forever, but one of the earliest instances I noticed was back in 2011 when the founder of VDARE, which is a white nationalist anti-immigrant hate group, came to Newtown, Pennsylvania to give a talk with a local Republican group called the Thomas Jefferson Club. So I think now what we're seeing, like it's always been going on, just maybe it wasn't, people didn't feel as emboldened to come out in the public. Right. But the danger now is just to it's become normalized. And what we're seeing is just so this paramilitary or militia group was going to go and kind of they were going to be part of this picnic right outside of the school board meeting. And they were going to stake out there from noon, until 6:45 or whatever when it started. And, one of the groups, I think there's 2 reasons why they're doing this. One is probably they see it as a recruitment opportunity because all these anti-maskers, people from Reopen Bucks, they share similar values, right? So it'd be a great recruiting event. And then I think it's also for intimidation. So after I exposed this initially, before I dumped the docs out there, the Reopen Bucks guy came to this group's defense and said that I was a liar. And that they had nothing to do with being a militia and paramilitary group, right? Which we know is just false.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing. I mean, you look at a group like this; they're just the evil Chucky-esque spawn of the Tea Party. All of this stuff, and I keep coming back to this. The Tea Party. They were the beginning of a lot of the really horrible stuff that's been going on, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. And now it's filtered down. With the Tea Party, it was going after Arlen Specter there in Lebanon, going, "Get your government hands off my Medicare," and it's filtered down to now we're talking about assaulting and possibly headshots on school board members.
Yeah, and I don't want to say like that's why they were going there. But what I'm saying is these are the types of things that they train for. So maybe they didn't see that as like as some kind of like battlefield. But Jesus, like who are these people? Who are these enemies? Is it people that like want to follow like CDC guidelines and wear masks, right? Because what we're seeing is just like it's become so polarized and just so nonsensical. There was a group of doctors in Doylestown, local moms with the kids in the school district, who organized a press conference. All they were advocating for was like a health and safety plan by the school district that did contact tracing as well as required masks, especially for the younger students who are too young to be vaccinated. And so as this was going on, you had people that were like the anti-maskers, like Reopen crowd, and I'm not saying they're specifically from the Reopen Bucks crowd, but they're from that movement, that broader movement, which, this militia group one could suggest is like the armed wing of it. Like QAnon is just like the completely delusional wing of the Republican Party. But these Reopen or these anti-mask folks were like yelling murderer to these people that were suggesting children should wear masks, like child abuse, just like completely unhinged.
Yeah, and you go, how is it that our education system has produced these people who are really, like you said, unhinged, and I would argue a lot of it has to do with the right wing talk radio space for the last 40 years that's created this, but also you get into some of these these Facebook groups and some of these internet dark channels. Where people who were, the anti-government, anti-establishment crowd, anti-society crowd, we've always had them. They've just now all found themselves. And sadly, a lot of them seem to either have some military experience or fantasize that they had some military experience.
Yeah, no, I mean, the news that they're getting, if you would even call it that, or, the information that they're receiving, that's part of the problem. And, like, some of it's like from like traditional news sources like Fox News, but if you listen to like Fox, like all of their talk is apocalyptic, right? Like they're trying to destroy America, like the Democrats, right? They're trying to take our freedom, right? So when they put it in those terms, and like each show, it's just like if you listen to it all day, they just keep beating it over and over, beating that drum, beating it into your head. Like these people probably think like these 3%er militia types, and even like these people that are just kind of like screaming like murder and child abuse because they see like being practicing like prevention of like an outbreak by having kids like wear a mask is somehow like impeding on their freedom. And so like they're the freedom fighters that are out, and they're the ones brave enough to speak up and try to save us and do whatever it takes. And in the case of the militia, train what seems like they're training for like some kind of like impending civil war. Right?
No, not just training for. Here's the thing. I live in the center of the state. I live in the place where the War College is. People love war here. A mile from my home is a free gun range where they actually have military style exercises. And I know some of these people who it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. These are people who fetishize refighting the Civil War and redoing. We're gonna fix things right this time, and it's twisted and crazy and really dangerous.
Yeah, it is. And just like another thing, like now, like what we've seen is just like with the way these people like approach like getting their information, like now Fox has become quote unquote too liberal, right? Like we had like the people for Trump president, local business owner, has the ear of Brian Fitzpatrick, the congressman down here. He gave an interview with the Globe and Mail before the election, and they asked him where he gets his news, and he said like Facebook, and when he was talking about like Fox News, he was saying, oh, they're too liberal for me. So like Facebook is a source of news where like you can post anything, at least, and then more so previously, but you could post anything from like these fake news sites and these troll farms, where the information, if you don't have like common sense or critical thinking skills, you don't recognize that it's complete bullshit.
Yeah. Now, isn't the reality in this, and I've been saying for a long time, we need to hold journalists to an actual standard. We need to hold these websites who claim to be news, who put out these stories, to some actual standards. Is there a way? I mean, you're somebody who does this for a living. I mean, you're a columnist in a number of places, and I've seen your writing all over the place, and I think you do fabulous work. But is there a way to fight back, to combat that, if the consumer isn't knowledgeable enough or concerned enough to filter through the kind of sources that they're seeing?
Yeah, I mean, a few things. One, support local progressive independent media, and then two, I mean, maybe like communities could kind of like give workshops, or have like some, host some kind of like town hall, right, to talk about these issues, and to give people the tools to help like recognize like which sites they should be wary of. And how to identify these sites. Like if you're seeing a site where they're not listing like any of the editors or the writers there, but they're calling themselves like the Pennsylvania, News and World Herald or whatever, you might not want to like take what they're putting out too seriously.
Right, and the author's Bobo 69 or something.
Yeah, exactly.
You might not want to buy that. And look, if it seems so skewed, I mean, I look at things on all sides. There's some stuff on the left that I go, yeah, come on, that's not even close to reality. You push that aside. And you said Facebook, and a lot of people are pointing to Facebook as part of the problem. Is that the problem? Because Facebook does some really interesting things, and that they want me to keep looking at Facebook. So if they know I'm crazy, they're going to keep feeding me the kind of stuff that's going to get me deeper and deeper and deeper into the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the mainstream media can do a better job of kind of like being transparent and like owning it, like when they, screw up, because journalists are people, right? Like shit's going to happen. They're going to get things wrong. But oftentimes you see like, the papers just changing something and not kind of like making sure that there's this like very visible correction, or making a point to make sure readers know that there was a correction. Or like even, you could like harken back to the coverage of, or to the run-up of the Iraq War. It's like the whole, like, Judith Miller, New York Times, her weapons of mass destruction reporting, that we know it turned out to be all bullshit, and it was pretty much based on one source, Ahmed Chalabi, who's like a convicted felon that couldn't travel to Jordan.
Yeah.
Stole like millions of dollars. And I think that, those types of things, or, something like that with like the, these blunders in the media with the way they kind of like cover some things, and then like the lack of like transparency and ownership when they do screw up, has created this kind of like loss of faith and trust in the media as an institution along like a large swath of the population, probably from both sides of the spectrum.
No, I'm with you. Something has to be done. But here's the other part of it. I go, we've had eras of yellow journalism. We've had eras of being polarized, and somehow we've found some way back to normal. There's the optimist side of me that goes, maybe we're going to be able to do that. But I'm looking at the stuff going on. I'm going, I don't know. When you're talking about headshots for school board members, and look, I can't imagine that you haven't had your share of people threatening you either.
Yeah, I mean, it's stressful. And, like these groups, they have like their little like digital brown shirts, on Twitter, that'll just kind of like go after you viciously and try to harass you. And that's just kind of like, part of the bullshit that you have to kind of like deal with and, protect yourself from, not just like for journalists, just for like, any public citizens that just disagree with them.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot going on. So the school board meeting is what, this Wednesday? You said
it's Wednesday. Yes.
So we're going to keep an eye on the news to see what kind of fun and shenanigans go on, and I'm hope you'll come back and share with us some thoughts on what goes on there. if anything bad happens.
Hey, Rick, I appreciate it, and I definitely will.
Good stuff, Cyril. I appreciate the time. Make sure you check out Cyril's work. We'll get some links out on where you can check out his columns at the Bucks County Courier Times and also the Intelligencer and also our good friends over at the Raging Chicken Press. Make sure you check out the work he does there. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
Saving work in America, one show at a time. The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1917. That was the day IWW leader Frank Little was buried in Butte, Montana. Little had been lynched on August 1st by police agents thought to be working for the despised Anaconda Copper Company. He had arrived in town to help organize 14,000 striking copper miners. Devastated by the deaths of 168 miners in the June fire at Granite Mountain and Spectacular Mines, mine workers formed the Metal Mine Workers Union and walked off the job. Frank Little had previously worked as a hard rock miner and organizer for the Western Federation of Miners. He also took part in the free speech campaigns on the West Coast. Little was involved in early drives to industrially organize oil workers and lumberjacks. He voiced his opposition to the First World War and sought to stop workers from enlisting. When Little arrived in Butte in July, he worked to build strike support, picket lines, and spread the strike to other trades across the city. Early on August 1st, 6 masked men broke into the boarding house where he was staying. He was beaten and taken from his room. His assailants tied him to the bumper of their car and dragged him through the granite streets of Butte to the Milwaukee Bridge, where he was hanged. An ominous note was pinned to his bullet-ridden body with the words that read, "Others take notice, first and last warning." It included the numbers 3, 7, and 77, as well as the initials of other union organizers in the area. As many as 10,000 marched in his funeral procession. Days after his lynching, martial law was declared. Labor radicals were rounded up and charged with espionage. The miners' strike and union were crushed. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So evidently the CEO of Cyber Ninjas, the CEO there has COVID. At least this is the way I'm reading this. Evidently someone at Cyber Ninja, very sick, quite sick is the actual language. So the fake GOP audit there in Maricopa County been delayed. So we're not going to get to know that they found nothing or how much nothing they found for a couple of days as the Arizona State Senate President Karen Fann announced today that I guess that and there are 2 other members of the 5-person team there who are quite sick after testing positive. Is this true? Is it possible that 2 of the 5 members, 40% of the audit team of super warriors, super ninjas, of cyber ninjas have the virus? Or is this a stall tactic to go, well, we don't really have anything yet. We're going to make some stuff up. Trust us. We got to get a little more creative. Or is it true? I mean, do we lose one of them? Do you care? And the thing is we've got these crazy people here in Pennsylvania who want to do the same thing. I mean, it's really quite remarkable that you have, when it was just Doug Mastriano, the senator from, I guess it's Adams County, when you just had, or Franklin County, when you had, that lunatic just running around, screaming that, oh, it was all rigged. We know, we found, we blah, blah. Remember when he had his little super spreader hearing that wasn't under oath and brought every winehead and every crackhead that he could grab into there, who made up some of the just most fantastical claims of, I saw this. They had thumb drives. They drove a truck around with ballots in it. I mean, it was a lot of really, deep kind of, you had to really be in the conspiracy to go, yeah, I'm going to buy that. Evidently, he wants to do here in Pennsylvania what they did in Arizona. And this is the power of right-wing media. Because I never thought Jake Corman was crazy. Jake Corman, for those who don't know, here in Pennsylvania is the Senate president pro tempore. He's the head guy in the Senate, one of the head guys in the Senate. I never thought of him as crazy. I've always thought of him as, he's off to the right, certainly, but I never put him in the, oh my God, you're crazy category. Evidently, he did Steve Bannon's podcast, and now they're going to be, I guess, pushing forward on some kind of an audit. Now they've named another person to head up this audit. This Chris Dush guy, who another senator from way up in the Jefferson County, up in the middle of nowhere. And they're going to go through and pretend like they found something, because this was always the scenario. This is how it was always going to work. Everybody understood this. I talked about it before the election happened, months before the election happened, because everyone was saying, hey, vote online, vote via the mail, get your mail ballot in. I voted for the second time in my entire life via absentee ballot. First time is I had to be out of town. Knew I was going to be out of town. It was years ago. But I voted by mail for the first time, by choice, and loved it, to be honest. I think we should do it more often. But said, look, as we do this, what's going to happen. You know that the people who show up are going to be counted first. And Trump is going to have a massive lead. And then they're going to start counting the mail-in ballots of all the Democrats in this state who, by the way, just a little factoid that kind of is important. Just kind of important. There are more Democrats, a large number more Democrats, like almost 2 million more registered Democrats than there are Republicans. Needless to say, on election night, Trump was up like 600,000 votes. That's a lot of votes. But it's not a lot of votes when you haven't counted half the ballots, when you haven't counted the other side's ballots, really. So it was entirely predictable. And look, I don't have a crystal ball. I'm not a genius. But even I figured this out. They're going to have a big lead on election night. Don't panic. Relax. Get out, vote, do what you got to do. And as they count the ballots, that lead will diminish. And it did, predictably. And it vanished completely to the point where Joe Biden won by 80,000 votes. Not surprising. Now, the weird part about this, and this is the part that the Mastrianos and the Dushes and the rest of them don't want to admit, they won their elections. If you're going to rig the game, seriously, if you're going to rig the game, aren't you going to rig the game a little bit in your favor? So that maybe you pick up a couple extra seats, maybe, just maybe. Grab one or two of those that are kind of on the fringe. Give yourself a better lead in the Senate. I mean, if really you had the ability to do what Republicans are saying that Joe Biden did, this is hysterical to me. Basically, I had a guy tell me one time that Joe Biden, learned coding, and he was in his basement during the election, figuring out how to recode all of the voting machines, which is insane. But it's what they believe, because it's what they keep telling each other. And look, the Steve Bannons of the world, they're never going to be honest. For them, it's about the game. It's about riling up their base. It's about how do they motivate the insane base. How do you get the death cult to march in lockstep? How do you get that? You get that by making the other side evil. You get that by saying, they're going to destroy your country. That somehow that mask that's going to protect your kids and theirs and mine, somehow that is a bridge too far. But, this is the great part, but they'll accept the crappy wages, the horrible working conditions. They'll accept all of the things that have happened to the working class of this country for the last 40 years and do it without question. But boy, you say, put a mask on that kid, they lose their ever-loving flippin' minds. Wow. Just plain lunacy. But I'm going to be kind of interested to see how the Republicans here in this state, conduct because the Republicans in Pennsylvania control the House and the Senate. If it's only for the governor that bad stuff doesn't happen. And listen up, Pennsylvania. Do not elect a Republican governor in 2022, because 23 will be a nightmare of horrible. Now, Attorney General Josh Shapiro vowed that he's going to challenge any attempts by the Republican cabal to do here in Pennsylvania what they did in Arizona. And look, I'm waiting to see what the report out of Arizona is. I know they've trashed all their voting machines. I know the county's going to have to buy all new stuff. I know they've caused the taxpayers of Arizona, massive, debt. But hey, you got to keep the big lie going. Got to keep it going. Fun times ahead. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, our good friend Bob Ney is going to be here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day. Stick around. Right back after this.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Rescue and recovery efforts have been slowed by Tropical Storm Grace.
Desperation deepens in Haiti.
Parts of North Carolina will spend weeks cleaning up after Fred.
Flash floods slam North Carolina. Wildfire smoke linked to higher COVID death rates. Plus,
tonight the Biden administration is reversing a Trump-era policy and will ban a common pesticide from use on farms.
EPA finally bans toxic pesticide linked to brain damage in children.
All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Chlorpyrifos has been used on numerous fruits and vegetables.
What has?
Chlorpyrifos.
I think she means chlorpyrifos. But, they don't pay me millions of dollars like they do Nora O'Donnell. This is your Green News Report.
Chlorpyrifos.
Okay, Desi Doyen, no matter how you pronounce it, it's a very good thing that the Biden administration has finally banned it. Unfortunately, we got a lot more to cover today as well.
Indeed, we do. First off, in western Haiti, desperation is growing among tens of thousands rendered homeless by a devastating 7.2 magnitude earthquake because rains and floods from Tropical Storm Grace have seriously slowed delivery of basic aid like food, clean water, and shelter as the risk of waterborne diseases rises. Here in the U.S., in North Carolina, as we go to air, dozens are missing after Tropical Depression Fred dumped more than a foot of rain in a single day on Tuesday. The National Hurricane Center has warned the northeastern U.S. of the risk of new flooding from Fred and also potential impacts from Tropical Storm Henri, which could bring even more rain, floods, and storm surge in coming days.
Fred, then Grace, then Henri. 1, 2, 3 in a row.
Remember, the hurricane rating system only covers wind speeds, not flood risk, and inland flooding is the leading cause of storm-related deaths in the United States. In Europe, the ring of wildfires around the Mediterranean show no signs of slowing down amid persistent heat and drought. A wind-driven wildfire has turned deadly in France. At least one person is confirmed dead after a new wildfire broke out in Saint-Tropez. Fires are now burning in parts of Portugal, Spain, Italy, Albania, Bulgaria, Macedonia, Greece, Turkey, Morocco, Algeria, and Israel.
Wow, and you didn't even mention the United States.
Well, speaking of the United States, in Northern California, the Caldor fire near Lake Tahoe continues to grow explosively, forcing new evacuations after it tripled in size in just 24 hours on Wednesday. Climate scientists warn that man-made global warming is increasing wildfire frequency and intensity.
Now I'm sorry I even mentioned the U.S.
You're going to be even sorrier now. A new study concludes that smoke from wildfires contributed to a significant increase in COVID-19 cases and deaths in Oregon, California, and Washington in 2020. Harvard researchers calculated that without the wildfire smoke, there might have been about 20,000 fewer COVID-19 cases and nearly 800 fewer COVID deaths in those states.
Wow.
That's because wildfire smoke contains extremely high levels of a very dangerous kind of air pollution, particles so tiny they can lodge in the heart and lungs, substantially compromising the ability to fight off the virus. That's according to Dr. Pyle Coley of KREM 2 News in Washington.
Actually more likely to catch COVID if you live in an area with a lot of wildfire activity. It increases the inflammation in the lungs because it reduces the immunity, because the lungs are so busy fighting the particulate matters that they're not as good at fighting COVID.
Well, that's just fantastic news upon fantastic news for those of us living out west.
Some good news. In a victory for Alaskan tribes, a federal judge this week threw out permits for a controversial oil project on public lands in Alaska's fragile Arctic.
Good for them.
The judge ruled that the Trump administration failed to adequately analyze the project's impacts on climate change and wildlife, as required by law.
How unlike them.
Finally, some very good news. In another reversal of a Trump-era policy, the Biden Environmental Protection Agency will ban the common toxic pesticide chlorpyrifos from use on food crops because it is linked to neurological damage in children. The Trump EPA had overruled federal scientists' warnings and removed barriers to the use of the pesticide, but the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals noted that the science linking chlorpyrifos to neurological damage like autism and learning disabilities is more than a decade old, and the court ruled the EPA must ban chlorpyrifos unless it could prove that it is safe.
Chlorpyrifos.
The ban takes effect in 6 months.
Don't think all that very good news made us forget about all that very bad news you started with, Desi Doyen. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Don't forget you can download our reports anytime via Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple, or Google Podcasts. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So it looks like another vaccine skeptic radio host bit the dust. Phil Valentine was his name. He died on Saturday. I guess he was diagnosed with COVID about a month ago. I remember seeing the story back then, because, he was, again, another one of these guys, I'll be fine, and, I'll get it, and I'll be fine, and I'll get through it. Well, he didn't. Now, as the story goes, and again, I don't know that this is true, part of me would respect him if he went down, going, no, it's nothing, and his last breath was, I deserve this. I'd respect that. He's saying, one of his last words were, go get vaccinated. So I guess even in that moment, maybe, I don't know. I don't know that I'm buying it. But here's the thing. How many right-wing radio hosts are going to be left after this? This is like, what, the fifth or sixth one? I don't know. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, our good friend, former Ohio congressman and political analyst, Bob Ney. Bob, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, thank you, Rick.
So I mean, it's sad. It's sad that these guys are going, but I got to be honest, I have no sympathy.
Well, I mean, anybody that dies, we all, think about their families and things. But, the statements he made, and this is the problem with this, and this is why people are, upset with him in the first place. And again, it's a shame he died. But how many people listened to him when he said, don't get the vaccination? Now, at the end, towards his end, he did say, go get vaccinated. He did that at the end, but how many people listened to him originally? And I think that's sad.
And how much, when you really look at the big picture of this, how much is the station and, the people who put him on the air responsible for that message as well?
Well, the stations have a disclaimer, and you know how that runs. They're not legally responsible for the content of the show host, so they do that. And then again, some of the stations say, "Well, we're not going to censor," but obviously nobody in the station was too alarmed about what he was saying, and people again listened to him. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, and again, you said something I didn't even really go to. How many people did listen to him? Crazy. Interesting story today that I just evidently breaking news today. Reuters reported that Igor Fruman, former Giuliani associate, talking about changing his plea from not guilty to possibly guilty. Am I missing anything?
No, I mean I think probably that Fruman is going to plead guilty on Wednesday. He's likely to plead guilty, and obviously he's going to do that because he's got a problem. And he's a former associate of Giuliani's, and he will, plead to federal campaign finance charges. Now, he was Igor Fruman was the Ukrainian-born businessman, and he pleaded originally, not guilty. I think 2 years ago, maybe,
right,
when the case came up. But now he's going to turn around and do it. But it accused he and another man named Parnas, and I think it's Levi or Lev Parnas, and they were carrying one-way tickets to Vienna when they were arrested at Dulles International Airport. I wonder where they were going with one-way tickets.
Out
right?
of Dodge.
Right, somewhere. And an indictment unsealed the very next day because they were watching for the pair, and they were making illegal straw donations, they call them, including about 300-some thousand to a pro-Trump PAC, Political Action Committee. And then there was a third guy, and he was in a scheme that somehow involved making, if I remember right, making donations funded by some foreign national who was not known and was nervous about his Russian connections and paranoid about it. So you've got four of them that were involved in some type of scheme of putting together these, in some cases, fake donations. And, of course, there's a famous picture of Lev Parnas, Igor Fruman, and Donald Trump Jr. at a table back in maybe 2017.
Yeah, all roads lead back to Trump. But when I saw this, my first thought is, how much is Rudy sweating tonight? Because I can't imagine he's just pleading guilty out of the goodness of his heart. There's got to be some, hey, we want something from you.
Well, sure, and if he has anything on Giuliani, he'll do it in order to, get a lighter sentence than he would normally get, before the judge, because there's the sentencing part of this entire deal, and that's where you go from your plea deal to where they want to know what you know, and then everything's, related to the judge of, yeah, he helped or he didn't help. So I'm sure they're after more, especially with Giuliani.
Yeah, cannot wait to see what comes out of this. The other news today, an internal investigation cleared the Capitol police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt. As Trump said, he knows who they are. I'm fully expecting at some point for them to release his name, but at least at this point, the internal investigation completely cleared the officer. You surprised that they're still throwing that out there?
You mean about the officer?
Yeah.
I wasn't surprised he was cleared.
I thought he was
because-
already cleared. I mean, that was the thing. I saw this today. I'm going, wasn't he already cleared? Are we clearing him again?
He was cleared. Yeah, you're correct. At one point in time, he was cleared, and I thought it was through the Justice Department.
Yeah.
Because it's federal, and I think it was. One good thing I would say, with Trump saying he knows his name, et cetera, nobody released his name from within the Capitol, and I'm sure a lot of people know the name, and nobody did that, and I'll give them credit for not doing that, because it just shouldn't be done. And again, full force has to be used. The door, I, like many former and current members, are familiar with. You come up the steps, you go through that door, you are literally 1.5 seconds away from opening another door, and to your left immediately is going to be the dais, where the speaker or the vice president at that point in time, could have been. Members and staff are on the floor. And again, the Capitol Hill police didn't know who in that whole surging crowd had weapons. I'll be frank with you. I'm shocked they didn't shoot more people.
That's me.
I'm shocked more people weren't shot. It is unheard of. And let me throw this out here, Rick. If this were outside the Oval Office and people had breached the White House, well, first of all, they would be machine gunned down. But if they were able to breach the White House and were at the door of the Oval Office, what do you think would happen, with Secret Service after they shot the people? Wonder what Trump would say at that point in time if he was in there.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent
It'd
point.
be a different statement.
No, and I said the day after it happened that if this were Black Lives Matter people, if this would have been Antifa, they'd have gunned people down. There'd have been hundreds of casualties in my view. But because these were, middle-aged, upstanding, God-fearing Christian white folk, or so we're led to believe, I think the frame of mind from the very beginning of the day played into all of this.
Yes, I think that the management obviously left the Capitol Hill Police rank and file out on the diving board is what they did. They did not say use full force, which had they said that, the rank and file of Capitol Hill Police would have used full force. Once they got into the building, you've got X amount of policemen surrounded in the rotunda. How many people had weapons? Of course they didn't start firing. People say, why didn't they do it then? Well, because the whole crowd, they could have all had weapons.
And that was the other thing I said. They probably thought they were outgunned.
Well, that's what I mean. There's a whole crowd in the rotunda. And you've got let's say 20 policemen, and you've got 300 of the rioters, and of course they didn't start firing in the rotunda. But I guarantee you, if people go over if a crowd would go over the fence of the White House, they will be shot, and nobody would say one word about the use of force in this country. Nobody.
I didn't.
So what was so different about the Capitol?
No, I didn't. I was with you. I'm surprised more people didn't get shot. In fact, if it were me, I think I probably would have.
Right. I think it's all justified. I thought it would be obviously a justified shooting, especially where she was, trying to get into this. And, I don't know, she might have been a nice person and was a veteran or, whatever, but she had no business trying to get through that door, which would have breached the floor of the House. No business.
No, I'm right there with you. Now, there's this story going on that the judge was really hard on this insurrectionist, gave him 5 months in jail. 5 whole months in jail, Bob. The judge was much harder on him than the government wanted. 5 whole months, Bob.
Well, the first person sentenced got a year, was it? The very first person, I think.
I don't think it was that stiff.
Maybe under, but if it was a year, it wasn't. It was lenient. I forget how much the first person got, but these are slaps on the wrist for what they did, and I'm just in shock because the government, was pleading on the very first case to set an example. They were pleading to do that,
8
and
months.
the judge didn't do it.
The first guy got 8 months.
8 months, okay. Complete slap. A year would have been a slap on the wrist. You know, if you go ahead and sell a certain amount of pot, you're going to do more time.
Yeah, and this has been my point in all of this. I mean, we've not held any of these people accountable, and to hear the stories, the government's being so harsh on these people. All they did was walk across a line, Bob. That's all.
It's baffling to me how they're getting no jail time.
Yeah.
I don't understand it.
Yeah, I had a guy tell me that all they did was cross a line. That's all. And it immediately made me think of a guy I met back in 2015. We did a civil rights tour. We traveled all across the southern U.S. to talk about labor's involvement in the civil rights movement. And I met this guy named Hezekiah Watkins. And his story, he was 13 years old when the Freedom Riders came to Jackson, Mississippi. And his friend pushed him over a line, just this line, and he was swept up with the Freedom Riders and thrown in Parchment Prison for 3 days at 13 years old with a rapist and a murderer. And I go, just stepped over a line. That's all.
Right.
Crazy.
And in and of course they didn't. They beat people. They, did everything under the sun. They had weapons. And that first case, that did do it, because the first Capitol riot, felony sentence, that signals to the other insurrectionists about what kind of deal they can expect or not.
Yep.
And had it been harsh, a lot of people, 600 some people, would have gasped and said, I better start thinking about this.
I better start singing.
Yeah. But right now, if you have done something a little less than the first guy that got the 8 months, you're probably going to be sitting there going, well, it might be 2 months house arrest for me.
Yep, and then you're a martyr.
And they're going to go fight it in court.
And then you get to wear that like a badge of honor in the crazy circles, because now you're a martyr.
Right, and it was federal property, the United States Capitol. If you go in I guarantee you, and you know this, if you're in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, or Newark, Ohio, wherever you're at, go ahead and go in a post office and break a window. Just a post office, and see what happens to you.
No, you're right. Again,
they're not going to say, "Oh, okay, come on Saturdays and wash the floor for your, come up and snow." You're going to get time.
Crazy. The other thing that's interesting to me, and I'm sure you've been following what's going on in Afghanistan, the same people who don't want you to wear a mask, the same people who probably crossed the line and walked between the ropes, and just another day in our capital. A lot of them are calling for us to not get out of Afghanistan. I'm shocked by the number of right-wingers who are saying, no, we shouldn't leave. Yet the latest YouGov poll that I saw, 81% of us say it's we need to support the people who helped us in Afghanistan, but we need to get out. Are you surprised by the number of people who are coming out saying, no, we need to stay?
Well, in a way, maybe they're just trying to take an opposite position. Look, 88. I can remember, when I was in office in the U.S. House, I think 88% of the people wanted us to do something, to go to war. 88.
No, we wanted blood. I've been saying this to people on Twitter all the time. People want to rewrite the history. No, the country wanted it. We wanted revenge. We wanted retribution. Right. We wanted blood.
They wanted it. They wanted it, and the corporate media went along with it and fostered it, just like they did with Iraq, and that's what happened. Now the numbers have reversed the other direction, almost 88, 81%. I mean, it's overwhelming, and I think some of the people that just say, well, we need to stay, are just doing it to be something opposite of President Biden.
Yeah.
Although it's opposite of former President Trump too.
Yeah, no, this is both Trump and Biden. I give him credit. In fact, Adam Kinzinger, the Republican representative from Illinois, he placed blame on the Trump administration for what's going on here, saying its 2020 agreement with the Taliban sowed the seeds for the U.S. Exit. And look, it was. I mean, we were supposed to be out of there on May 1st. Biden tried to push it back a little bit to give more time. Look, did he screw things up? Yeah, I think we could have done something a little different, but we got to get out of there.
Well, we have to get out of there, number one. Number two, and look, I'm all for open air, and I'm all for, a lot of things being revealed, like the 911 report, et cetera. However, I do want to say that when the military, when it gets announced today on national media that the U.S. military is telling the president, you got to decide by Tuesday whether you want to extend the evacuation, that needs to not happen.
Right.
There are certain things we need to not know at this point in time. There's plenty of time to find out, everything. Just like the Senate Democrats who are, going to have these hearings. Wait. Go. Your political futures will be there. Just wait a bit. This is not the time to discuss that the Senate has said it needs to be investigated, the I word right now.
Yeah,
we've got to get Americans out and Afghans out, and everybody needs to, I think, at least, cool their jets, let the process work. Later on, they can look at it, debate it, investigate it, whatever they want to do. But to announce that, hey, Mr. President, we're the military, and hey, you need to tell us by Tuesday. Why don't we just go, broadcast that to the entire world, which is what happened.
No, it's crazy. But, at this point, get the people out of there, like I said, and then down the road, whatever you got to do. I personally think Biden's going to come out of this okay, because the massive people want to get out of there. And I think, look, if he comes out and he says, look, the exit wasn't optimal. We made some mistakes. But, we played the hand we were dealt. We did what the American people wanted, and this is the outcome. I think he'll be okay.
I think he'll be okay. And there's one other thing I really, really hope that the president does. And this is not just to, quote, fire somebody, because friends of mine today call him and say, he needs to fire somebody tomorrow morning. No, if he fires somebody tomorrow morning and there's not really, really good cause, then he's saying something is really haywire, and that's not a good thing to do. But at some point in time, if the intel, and this is not a matter of firing, this is a matter of correcting, if the intel, once again in our country's history, told the White House this entire time, except for the last 3 weeks, that, it's okay, everything's stable, it's all going to work, they need to clean up the intel. They need to clean up the
I've been
intel
saying that
service.
for decades.
Oh, sure. They need to do it. Nobody's ever done it, and they need to do it.
No, because I had this long back and forth with someone the other day, talking just about the intel and how we got into this war, and I'm going, there were a lot of mistakes, and you can't just blame Biden for this. You can't blame the guy at the end who was left holding the giant steaming pile of what. You got to go through all of this, and there's this rewriting of the history, and as you accurately pointed out, overwhelmingly the American people were behind going into Afghanistan, because I still think we believed it was going to be another weekend like it was, back when Storm and Norman, got the Iraqis out of Kuwait. A couple weeks in the sand, home for the parades, just in time for whatever event was coming next, and it didn't work out that way. Here we are, 20 years.
Right. And the intel services, and I know one of your listeners is thinking, Bob, please don't say anything about Iraq, because I said this enough on your show, but the bottom line is, accountability, and I would love for those people who stood there and either lied to us or were the largest intel idiots on planet Earth, I would love for somebody, Democrat, Republican, combination of both, whoever, to nail them down. Who were they? And why did they say what they said? That's never happened either. And that got us into a major war because they lied.
Yeah. Well, it is where we are.
Never corrected. Never
Bob,
corrected.
I appreciate the time. As always, great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
But, I look at this, and really, the reality is, overwhelmingly, we wanted to get into this. And now, overwhelmingly, we want to get out. So you can't now then turn back and point your finger at Biden and go, it's all your fault, which is what's happening. You're seeing, and I think Bob hit it on the head. There are people who just want to point their finger at Biden because he's the opposite. He's on the other team. When Trump said he wanted to get out, I was in favor. Let's get out. Now, did he do a lot of really dumb things? Yeah. But at the end of the day, getting out means getting out. What will be interesting to see in the coming weeks, months, and possibly years is what happens in Afghanistan. And one of the things we're going to talk about this week is how the Chinese play into this. Will the Chinese go in and fill the void that we're leaving behind? Because look, the American people are tired of throwing money into that hole. Will the Chinese go in and do it differently? Will the Russians and the Chinese? How is this going to play out there? Because understand, Afghanistan has a lot of raw material. Will there be a different deal with the Taliban? Is there a way forward, considering we've educated probably half of the country at this point? Will there be something? We'll find out. I'm hoping 20 years of making big rocks small. I'm hoping 20 years of being there turns into something positive, moves us in a direction towards something positive. I'm hoping it wasn't all a waste. But that's what only time's going to show. But I'll tell you, we should not spend another dime there or any more time there. Just that simple to me. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. The Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go wherever you go. Big week ahead. Lots on the agenda. Possibly an infrastructure bill going to be moving around a little bit. Also, what's going on in Afghanistan. And, well, it's healthcare month. Going to talk about that as well. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people